Hi, everyone. I am here today to teach you 3 steps to planning your online course. And in a former stage of my life, I was a high school science teacher, and this is actually the same process that I use to plan an entire year's worth of lessons, teaching 150 students a day. And I'd like to go through 3 key questions, and those correspond with the 3 steps. 3 key questions to answer when you're organizing the content of your online course. Or this can work for an ebook or an audiobook. You could even use it for like a paid podcast. This format works for all different types of information products. You will be able to identify a specific overall learning objective, again, for your course, workbook, audiobook, information product. You'll be able to determine your students' prior knowledge and misconceptions, and you'll be able to select a suitable assessment method, sometimes a self-assessment method, for your information product. And by the end of this webinar, hopefully you'll have a simple plan for structuring your course. And that's the question that I get the most often when I'm talking to people who want to create an online course. They don't know what to include, what to leave out, how long should it be, how much content is too much. And when you follow these steps, it will become very clear what your students need to know and what you need to teach them. So the first question that I want you to ask yourself is, what will students be able to do after completing the course? I think a lot of people come up with a topic. They say, I want to teach a course about web design. That's a topic and it's not a lesson. The first question I want you to ask yourself is, what will students be able to do after completing the course? And a lot of times, people who want to create a course, they come to me and they say they have a topic, but they don't have a lesson. And the difference between a topic and a lesson is kind of like this. So a topic would be, hey, I want to teach a course about web design. Okay, that's really broad. But if you narrow it down to a lesson, narrow it down to something like, well, I want to teach authors how to build their own website in 1 week. That is a lesson. And something to keep in mind as you're structuring your course, there's a difference sometimes between teaching skills versus teaching knowledge. And when we were in school, a high school, sometimes even college, a lot of what we learn is learning knowledge. But I think in the adult, once you're an adult and you're in the business world, a lot of times what you want to learn is a particular skill. And if you are a service provider, that's typically what you're going to be teaching with your online course. So, for example, how to write a compelling sales page, how to create and leverage reels on Instagram, how to knit a sweater. That could be the skill that you want to teach. And then coaches are typically teaching a blend of skills and knowledge. So some of the coaching courses that I've seen, how to detox relationally after a breakup. And so the students in that class, they need to know certain things about psychology, their mental health, kind of what their emotions feel like physically. And then they also need to learn skills for how to manage those emotions, how to start an online business. You need to know concepts like profit margin and revenue and all those things. And then you also need to know how to manage those concepts. So that's a skill and knowledge. How to find more copywriting prospects. Again, there's a lot of knowledge behind that, but then it's also teaching a skill. And there's typically a baseline level of knowledge that you need in order to learn the skills. You can't learn how to balance your budget if you don't know what a budget is. So it's usually not just one or the other. It's usually a blend of skills and knowledge. And we'll talk a little bit more about sort of that background knowledge in the second section. So when you're putting together your online course, you want to come up with a specific learning objective, and both for the overall course and for each of the individual parts. And I kind of modeled that a little bit at the beginning. And I said, by the time you finish this webinar, you will be able to do X, Y, and Z. And that's usually how I like to think about these learning objectives. And there's a couple different levels of learning objective. This is one framework that people use to think about it. It's called Bloom's Taxonomy. And and it's usually depicted as a pyramid, but I like this model here where it's the circles kind of inside of each other, because the idea being each of these different levels is part of the other. So the first level is just remembering. Can the student recall or remember a definition or a concept that you told them? And then above that, level 2 is understanding. Can the learner explain that idea? If they can't even remember what the name of the concept is, they're not going to be able to explain it. Then on top of that is application. Can they use that information in a new way? Analyzing, can they look at the different parts and compare and contrast? Evaluating, can they make a decision based on evidence that you showed them? And then creating, can they create a new product or point of view? And the higher the learning objective is, the more of these smaller learning objectives you're going to want to build into the course itself, kind of along the way. And most self-paced information products, so if you've got a video course that people can go through on their own, you've got an ebook that they can go through on their own, most of the learning objectives for those are going to be the so-called lower ones, so remembering, understanding, and applying. The higher level objectives, analyzing, evaluating, your options or creating an action plan, that's going to be typically found more in one-to-one services or group coaching settings. If you can create a self-paced product that can accomplish some of these higher level objectives, that's going to be a course or a workbook that is going to have a lot more value, because you're going to be able to get those higher objectives for people without meeting with them one-on-one or in a group. There's other objectives that you can think of as well, sort of more in the affective domain. And I know this is probably kind of hard to see, but if you want to look up the B2B Value Pyramid and the B2C Value Pyramid, this is produced by Bain. And you can think about not only what you want your students to be able to do, but what will they believe and what will they feel as a result of your course. This is especially important for coaches who are often typically working with some of these more emotional and relational based outcomes that they want to get. And again, you can kind of look this up for more detail. This is kind of hard to read on here, but generally speaking, people want to avoid a negative feeling or they want to achieve a positive feeling, or a little bit of both. And you can set that kind of learning objective for your course as well. So if I create that course on web design for authors, they will be able to build a website for themselves, and they will feel confident about sharing their work with agents and publishers and readers. And so they have the cognitive or skill-based learning objective of building the website, and then they have the affective learning objective of feeling more confident. There's a couple limitations to these sort of pyramid-shaped models. I would say that higher level objectives are not necessarily better or more important than lower level ones. And you also don't need to have a learning objective or a value from every single level on these little pyramid things. But the one thing that does make sense in the pyramid model is that you do need to have these sort of foundational learning objectives or affective learning objectives. You need to have those foundational ones to support the higher ones. Also, your learning objectives can often make really good benefit statements for your marketing as you're trying to market your course. And so if you're watching the replay, you can go ahead and pause here and identify a possible learning objective for your course, your workbook, your paid audiobook, whatever it is that you're making. Identify a possible learning objective for that course overall. And once you've done that, then I want you to think about the second question, which is, what do students already know, or what do they think they know about your topic? And prior knowledge is really important to think about so that, one, you don't waste their time on things that they already know. They're going to get frustrated and quit if it's just content that they already mastered, that they already know about. On the flip side, you also don't want to skip over skills or knowledge that they need to be successful in your course, but they don't have it yet. Kind of the opposite problem, but same effect. They get overwhelmed or discouraged and they give up. The other reason it's important to know kind of what students are coming in with is so that you can help them overcome resistance to change. And with online courses that are geared towards, the business owners and just people who are out in the workforce, a lot of times motivation can overcome some of that resistance to change, but not always. There's an idea in education about misconceptions and misbeliefs. And the idea is that nobody comes in as a blank slate. Everybody comes in, they've already had some experiences with this topic. They think they know what is going on. They think they know how to solve their problem, but obviously they know that it's not working. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in the course, but they may still have some of those misconceptions sticking in their mind, and you have to help them overcome those before you can teach them something new. So, personal example for me, I played piano for 12 years as a child, and I actually did not really learn proper hand positioning from my first piano teacher. And it didn't really matter for the first couple of years because I was just playing for release or something like that. But when I tried to play some of the more complicated pieces, it turned out I didn't have enough mobility in my wrist to be able to actually do that. And so my second teacher had to help me unlearn those old habits before I could learn the new techniques. She would actually put little erasers and pencils and stuff on the ledge of the piano underneath the keys. And if I hit them with my wrist, I had to start over on the whole piece. Very old school, but it worked. And again, these sort of misconceptions are less of an issue because most learners are self-selected. They have chosen to be there. They're really motivated to overcome this problem that they have. But a lot of times, imposter syndrome, comparisonitis, others just sort of affective barriers can still prove to be obstacles as people are learning. So you want to give them a way to overcome those. And there's a lot of ways to figure out what your students already know. This will help you in your positioning as you're marketing it. It will also help you develop the content. I highly recommend, if you're creating a course, to teach it live at least once, preferably more than once, so that you can see where those gaps in knowledge are. I know it's really tempting. You want to get that evergreen product done right away, but I really highly suggest teaching the content a couple times through live so that you can see where people fall down. But other ways that you can figure out what students already know, you can just give them a good old quiz. I actually highly recommend that, either at the beginning of the course or maybe even before they buy, and see kind of what they know, especially if you have sort of a more complicated onboarding process for your course, to see if it's a good fit for somebody. Give them a little quiz and kind of see where they're at. You can always conduct surveys or interviews. You can look at your marketing analytics and see which of your content pieces are getting a lot of traction and comments. If you're a coach, you can look at frequently presented issues. So what do people often come to you looking for help with? If you're a service provider, you can look at the common roadblocks or stumbling points in conducting your one-to-one services. So again, if you're watching the recap, this one's a couple questions to ask yourself here. What skills and knowledge do your students need before starting your course? So if I'm teaching a course on algebra and somebody comes in and they don't know addition, they're not going to be very successful. So what are kind of the foundational skills and knowledge do they need before starting your course? And it's okay if that If you find that the level of skill that you need for the course, it's okay if if that excludes people. You can't make a course that fits everyone, right? You couldn't make a math course that teaches calculus and addition. Like the calculus students would be bored out of their minds and the addition students would be completely overwhelmed. So it's okay, and it's actually good to really hone in on what level your course is for. Another question you want to ask is, what do your students already know about your topic? This kind of, again, prevents you from over teaching or under teaching. What misconceptions or misbeliefs might prevent them from reaching the learning objectives? And then if you don't know some of this information, how can you find out? Again, you can use some of the tools I mentioned in the previous slide. And a lot of that is also just good customer research, good marketing research. So you can kind of, I heard somebody say, feed two birds with one scone instead of kill two birds with one stone, which I like that a lot. And then the final question I want you to ask yourself as you're planning your course is, how will you and your students measure learning? And this is something that I think gets overlooked a lot. Everyone is concerned with how much is my course selling? How much money am I making from it? And that's okay. It's fine to create a course as a scalable income stream. That's what we all want, right? But sales and learning are not the same thing. Just because someone buys the course doesn't mean that they learn anything from it. We all know, how many courses have we all bought and never actually opened? So you want to have a way to measure learning beyond how many people are buying the course. Sharing information is also not the same as learning. I can sit here and talk for hours and hours, but that doesn't mean that my students have learned anything. Completing an activity does not mean that somebody has learned. And I figured this out the hard way when I was teaching science. I think I was doing an activity in physics, which falls faster, a bowling ball or a ping pong ball. And we did this whole big lab experiment, and the kids were really excited. They were super engaged. And then I gave them a little thing at the end called an exit ticket. I put a question up on the board and they wrote their answer down as they were walking out the door. And I looked at these exit tickets and I was like, nobody got the point that I wanted them to get. They all had fun doing the activity, but they did not actually learn the concept that I wanted them to learn. So you need to have ways to measure actual learning, and course completion rates are not it. Course sales rates are not it. You need to have some other type of assessment built into your course, and it can be self-assessment, which we'll see here. And so I like to have some sort of, I don't know, to use the school metaphor again, kind of final project or final test that students will complete by the end of the course. Now, I think most online courses, again, because they're teaching skills, would not lend themselves to, 100-question multiple choice quiz or test at the end. But what you can do is set up sort of a final work product that they will have completed by the end of the course. So this could be an action plan that they fill in throughout the course. This could be a toolkit. They watch the course videos and then they fill in things on the toolkit, and then they have a tool that they can actually use for the skill that they want to be practicing. Or you can just have, an actual product at the end, like, I'm teaching you to build a website. At the end, you should have a website when you're done. And so when you kind of determine the learning objective and then the final project that assesses that learning objective, what you can do is work backwards to teach the skills and the knowledge that are needed to get to that final product. So let's say, and just to take a non-business example, let's say I'm teaching people how to make a dress at home, and that final product is the dress. If they haven't made the dress, they haven't learned the course, right? So the final product is the dress. Well, what do they need to know how to do in order to get there? Well, they need to know how to adjust the dress once it's put together. And before that, they need to know how to put the dress together in the first place. They need to know how to cut fabric. They need to know how to read the patterns. They need to know how to measure themselves to get the right fit for the dress. They need to know how to operate a sewing machine. So once you have the final destination, it will be a lot easier to see the steps you need to take to get there. And when you have the final project, you want to not only have the final project, but ways to evaluate that project. So, I can make a dress, but if it doesn't fit me, then I've probably done something wrong along the way. And so a lot of times you can include ways for students to evaluate their own progress, especially if it's a self-paced course and you're not there to kind of engage with them along the way. Give them a way to know that they are doing it correctly. So if you're doing a workbook, this was one that I did. We came up with sort of sample personas, sample students, and we followed them throughout the entire workbook. And so we put sample answers. And then I had sort of like annotations, it's like self-coaching almost. And so it shows them, okay, here's the questions to think about, and here are some follow-up things to think about as well. You can do a checklist, especially if you're teaching a skill. If you are creating a business website, you should have these 10 things on it by the time you are done. If you're on a course platform, a lot of them have assessment, like quizzes in there that you can use. Most of the ones I've seen are multiple choice, which has the benefit that you can set a correct answer. So it's kind of self-grading. You can also, we did one where this is actually a PDF, not a web page. So it's a PDF and they can click on the different quiz questions and a little answer bubble thing will pop up. So self-evaluation can be very powerful, especially again, if you're in a self-paced course. And so you as the instructor are not in there to offer support in real time. They can at least kind of check their work along the way. The other option you can have is teacher evaluation. And some of these options will be good upsells that you can add on to your course. So you can always look in your course platform and you can see either individually or as a class, how many modules that they've completed. Again, completion rate is not the most accurate measure of progress, but it is something. You can at least see like, hey, I saw that you stopped at module 3, do you need any extra help? And that can be something that you follow up with, or you can have someone who's a course manager following up on those students so that they're not just left hanging. Because what I've noticed, at least for myself, is even if it's my fault and I don't put the work in and I don't complete the course, in my head, it's the course that failed me. I don't take responsibility all the time for, oh, hey, I didn't, put the work into this. And I think when we create a product and we give it to a customer and that product and they don't complete it, some of that I think does transfer onto us as the brand. And so you want to do as much as you can to actually get the results that you promised in your marketing. And that's when you get the glowing testimonials. That's when you get the referrals that just send new customers to you. When you pay attention to the success of your students, they will take care of you in the form of referrals and testimonials. So just a little plug there for paying attention to this sort of thing. You can also sometimes, if you have quizzes in your course platform, you can see kind of how many people missed that one or how many people got that one correct. So if a lot of people are struggling in a particular area, that can be a sign either that the question needs to be rewritten, or you need to look at where you thought you taught that concept and make sure that it's actually clear and teaching what you wanted it to. Other ways that you can provide teacher evaluation, and again, these are really good upsells that you can have for your course. You can have office hours that they can, have access to. You can, if it's a workbook or something that they're creating, they can sign up to have you just record a Loom video going through their website or their sales page or the workbook that they completed and kind of giving them feedback that way. And that can be something that they pay extra for. That's totally fine. And then, of course, you can always offer some sort of one-on-one session for troubleshooting or extra support. And then I always like to also include some sort of survey at the end. And I know for marketing purposes, you're asking a certain set of questions, but for learning purposes, it's going to be a slightly different. Don't just ask, did you like this course? That doesn't tell you a whole lot for marketing or for learning assessment. Ask them to tell you what they learned, how or whether they're applying it, what they're still maybe struggling a little bit with, what kind of results they've gotten. And those will make really good testimonials for you as well. So as we're wrapping up, if you're watching the replay, go ahead and pause here and brainstorm some sort of final project or assessment that allows your students to demonstrate mastery of the overall learning objective. And so with these 3 pieces, learning objective, prior knowledge, and assessment, the only thing that's left is just delivering the knowledge or teaching them how to do the skill. And so this is how you structure your entire course. So you pick your overall learning objective and then break down the other things they need to learn sort of as part of that. And then you just go in order. So you have a learning objective, you assess what they already know about the topic, you deliver new knowledge or, help them practice skills, and then you give them a way to assess, okay, have I mastered this? Have I not? And then if so, then we move on and you do the same thing. I recommend always kind of recapping what was learned in a previous module, especially if it is self-paced. It might be a couple weeks or a couple months, between modules. And so give them a way to recap that. You can also connect it with what they already know in other areas as well. So then just kind of rinse and repeat learning objective, prior knowledge, skill delivery, and assessment. And then at the end, that final project, that final work product, what are the deliverables for it and how can they evaluate their work either themselves or have you evaluate what they have accomplished. If you have other questions about format, platform, where your course can fit in your business ecosystem or other details, or you need help organizing your materials, I do offer comprehensive course planning and production services, as well as quick shot consulting to help you charge through a specific obstacle. So you can always contact me by email or go to my website, or I'm trying to be more active on LinkedIn. I'm still figuring that out, but you can always send me, you can always connect with me on there as well. So thank you so much. I hope this was helpful.